first wanted to ask you how you came up with the concept, I mean, I believe you coined it, of dynamic symbolism.
Well, dynamic symbolism I came up with several years ago, I think about 15 years ago. I had been painting for quite a while, and what I wanted to do was to find out how I paint the paintings I do. Dynamic symbolism, my style, is it's abstract, but it's not planned. I don't plan the paintings, I don't do any sketches generally. I spend a lot of time doing pen and pencil sketches just on scraps of paper, but not for particular paintings. And so I started seeing pictures in my paintings when they were done, and I always wondered how I did that. So I studied artists, and I studied a lot of art history to try to find something that was similar. And I've been looking on the internet, I've done a lot of research, and I never found anything that was similar, or the same. I could say it was in my genre. So I had to name it myself. So it's dynamic because it changes, the art, and what I see in the art changes. And there's symbols in it that I've done quite a bit of research on symbols, so I decided to call it dynamic symbolism.
Great. And I do think it is unique unto itself, but I also see that you maybe have been influenced by some other isms in the art world. So tell us a little bit about your major art influences on your work.
Well, I started painting with a lot of color, and I started using pastels. And I sent a painting to my grandmother, who is also an artist. She is a landscape oil painter. And she sent me a poster by Kandinsky and said, you should look into Kandinsky because your art is similar. And so I did a lot of research, and when I was at Stanford, I studied in Berlin for 9 months. And I lived there. We were surrounded by the wall in the 1980s, and I did a lot of research into Kandinsky, and he was one of the first abstract painters. He was the first non-objective artist, which means that he didn't have objects in his paintings, and he was very focused on how color influences the human psyche and consciousness and feelings, how people feel about different colors, and his whole point was to influence people spiritually. So I thought that was interesting. What happens in my art is I don't have particular ideas or symbols that I'm painting consciously, but they come up unconsciously. So I often tried to find that. So Kandinsky, the way I look at the paintings and the way I've learned to look at them is similar to the way the Cubists look at paintings, where you look at one object from several different angles at the same time, yes. Or parts of features or half faces, things like that. A lot of that kind of imagery shows up in dynamic symbolism too.
I also wanted to ask you about your technique and process as an artist. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I paint with acrylic paints, and I like the really large canvases. I keep buying larger and larger brushes so that my shapes will get bigger and bigger, because when I started, I usually was painting or drawing with charcoals or pastels on very small pieces of paper, especially as a student and having the space or money to invest in it. And I have really tiny little things that I can do, but I'm trying to expand and really make them bigger. So that's what my process is now. Is to
larger than this?
I have goals to paint larger than this,
but not as small as this.
Well, I do like the small. Those pieces I use leftover paint.
My art is deeply influenced by nature. Dynamic symbolism is filled with animal and natural archetypes, unconsciously accessed in my painting process. Autumn oak is about an ancient tan oak that lives in the mountains near my home.
interesting video. I really appreciate you having shown us
thank
that.
you.
But let's talk a little bit just about how you produced that video.
Well, I've always wanted to make my pictures move, and I often think that some of the pictures are kind of like a film that's been condensed into one frame. So I wanted to expand that. So I used, for the animation for the little leaves, I used After Effects, and I cut out masks with Photoshop, and I made them all move. And I used the Luma key in Final Cut Pro to get some of the effects that I did, and the differences between dark and light. I was really interested in that. So that's mostly what I did for that video.
Absolutely, made good use of those Photoshop filters and Final Cut Pro. Great. So now we're going to see some images, some still images of your work, and hopefully we get some commentary on that as well. That would be great.
Yeah, we're going to start off with some of my earlier work.
Okay.
This is a piece that I did in the 1990s. It's called Dancing with Swift Shields, and this one has a history. I did it right after two of my very dear friends and teachers actually died of cancer. And so it was dedicated to them, and in it, I always saw in the center of it a crab shell. And I see sharp edges coming off and crab claws coming out of the middle. And I sort of see little figures with shields, and it was sort of a sad piece to me. But I was at a show, and I was talking to a lot of people, and an East Indian woman was looking at this piece, and she looked at it for a really long time. And she said, I finally went up to her, I said, well, how do you like the piece? And she said, I really like the elephant. And I went, where is the elephant? And she showed me right in the center. Right in the center, you can see an elephant. There's ears, there's a trunk, and tusks coming out, and there's an eye. And I thought it was really interesting that a woman from India, where they revere the Ganesh, which is the remover of obstacles, would see the elephant. And then, of course, I saw it.